All right, let's go. Appreciate everybody being on here tonight. I've got a record number of slides. I don't know if that equates to a record amount of time that we're going to be talking tonight. I've always tried to be punctual, but the last two Wednesdays have just been full of what I hope you guys would say is tremendous content, great content. Last week we ran 2 hours and 15 minutes. The week before we ran 2.5 hours. And I've got more content tonight to share with you than we did last week. So I think it's possible that we run a little bit longer tonight. I'm going to be tying things up and try to get everybody out of here by 9 o'clock and keep this under 2 hours. So we're going to move quickly. I've changed the way that I'm doing links a little bit this week. So in an effort to keep the slides moving, I'm going to send out all the links to all the stuff and the strategies and the downloads and the information in here all at once at the end. So in the chat box, if you can see the chat box, go ahead and type a message in the chat box. So I know that everybody's in there and you guys can all see it. Go ahead and type a message, find the little chat button, and then just type in hi. There you go. Good. Yeah, Paul, I see you there. Great. So in this message box, I'm going to drop all the links in at the end of the night. So all this information, this whole thing's being recorded. It's available on our website. I'm going to give you all the links. So we're going to try to move through this quicker. I'm going to try to get you guys out of here earlier rather than later. So I think that everybody will appreciate that. So I want to start off, and I got something interesting. We all have some level of interest in science, I think. I want to ask the question, what does everybody think the greatest discovery in the history of the human race has been? Type in the chat box here. What do you think the greatest discovery in the history of the human race is? And I'll tell you what, I'll give you a few things to think about and choose from here. I mean, the Copernicus, we can talk about Newton and his gravity, fire, great one. Oxygen, Rosetta Stone. I mean, the Big Bang Theory. All of these are great guesses at what's the greatest discovery. Penicillin, yeah, penicillin, anesthesia, antibiotics. All these great discoveries. Aside from fire, which somebody had to guess fire. You just had to guess fire and ruin my great story, but that's okay. Aside from fire, all of these things, and let me actually here, I'll throw in a few more. Infrared. I mean, the first and second law of thermodynamics. The second law, entropy. Entropy is alive and well now, isn't it? Entropy is alive and well in so many ways right now. The telegraph, anesthesia. A few of you said anesthesia, 1846. The atom bomb in 39, or more specifically, the Manhattan Project. But none of these, in fact, are the most important discovery, the single greatest discovery in the history of humanity. Those of you from Texas would probably argue, in Florida, you'd probably argue that air conditioning is the single most important discovery in the history of humanity. That may be in August, but the single greatest discovery in the history of humanity was ignorance. And believe it or not, ignorance wasn't discovered until about 1500 AD. If you want to think about it this way, if you were born in any 500-year increment before 1500 AD, life didn't really change for you. You may have been living in a mud hut instead of a tiki hut or a stone hut, or you may have had a brass sword instead of a bronze sword. But largely, until 1500 AD, nothing really changed in 100 or 500-year increments. At some point they started building rock castles, but the modern science and the thirst for knowledge that led to all these other discoveries didn't start until what's commonly accepted as the scientific revolution around 1500. And since the scientific revolution, we've advanced more in the last 100 years, from 1920 to 2020, than humanity advanced in the prior 10,000 years. And that curve is only increasing exponentially. Then the next 100 years, we're going to have advanced more than in the last 100,000 years is what's being projected. And remember back the previous slide, nothing really significant was discovered until 1500 AD. So what really changed in 1500 AD? Why am I talking about ignorance here? Well, in 1500, there was a couple things that happened. Two primary things led to this discovery, or the willingness to admit to being ignorant, right? Modern science is based on the admission that we simply do not know everything. And even more importantly, it accepts that the things that we think we know could still be proven wrong as we gain more knowledge. In modern science, no concept, no idea, no theory is considered sacred or is considered beyond a challenge. If you look prior to the scientific revolution, 1500 AD, the answer to things that we did not know was, well, that's unimportant. Or you just need to ask someone wiser who's a little bit farther up the totem pole. The second characteristic of ignorance is a thirst for new knowledge. The second characteristic of the scientific revolution was the centrality of observation and mathematics. And modern scientists try to obtain new knowledge, and they do so by observing what's going on and using mathematics to connect all these observations and all these things together to form these elegant, comprehensive theories. Modern science isn't content with how things work or our current understanding. And they're using these theories to acquire new powers, develop new technologies. So what does this matter? Why am I telling you about the scientific revolution? How does this apply to your dental practice today and right now? Well, let's rename some of these things. Instead of calling it a willingness to admit ignorance, let's say it another way. And let's say that we're going to seek clarity over seeking certainty. We want to practice being very clear about what's going on rather than trying to be very certain about what we think we know. Right now, I'm talking to a lot of doctors that have a lot of uncertainty, and there's a lot of fear of the unknown. How long is this thing going to last? When's it going to be over? How quick are we going to sling back? When's my state going to open up? What PPE is going to be required? What's going to happen to insurance reimbursements? Are they going to reimburse for PPE? All these questions and these uncertainties. And to compensate for that uncertainty, there's a lot of people that are getting very stuck in what they believe. They know this is going to happen, or they strongly believe in this concept of maybe pent-up demand, that when they reopen, there's going to be all this business for them to have, or they know their practice is just going to be dead for 6 months no matter what they do. The reality is, the only thing we know right now is we know whatever we're going to guess is going to be wrong. That's the reality of the truth. Whatever we think right now, we know it's going to be wrong. The real truth and the reality of the situation is we need to be constantly seeking clarity of this ongoing, evolving situation. Admitting ignorance doesn't mean we're stupid. It means we're constantly trying to find what's going to work and how this is going to play out, instead of trying to be certain and assume that we know everything. Now, if we want to look at the second item, instead of a thirst for knowledge, let's call this seeking the bigger, better future. As you're looking across the practice landscape right now, what's going to change? What do you need to do to level up yourself, to level up your team? What's the strategy in place for your marketing, your people, your practice, for communicating with your patients now to ensure that you slingshot out of this? Here's a few things you might be wanting to think about. What about the appointments that are already made, and how are you thinking about your strategy for reappointing the ones that you were closed during? What about how your attendance rates are going to look? Have you thought about how you're going to get patients to attend their appointments? And what about the ones that are pre-scheduled, how you're going to handle those? Let's talk about case acceptance. How are you positioning your expert status and your practice safety plan, given that the government is saying that we may never shake hands again? How are you going to convey your expertise and establish rapport in that environment? How are you prioritizing your patients in larger cases ahead of maybe, say, hygiene, considering that your restorative may carry a lot of the load initially if there is not pent-up demand? Hygiene may have your highest no-show rate, or maybe you're thinking that hygiene is going to be great and restorative is going to have a problem. How are you going to be figuring this thing out to make sure that when you open your practice back up, you're ready to rock and roll? Let's talk about marketing. How are you going to attract more and better patients if this thing prolongs out? How are you going to continue to build and dominate your local market area? Are you going to be marketing like everybody else, or have you changed your strategy for this post-COVID world? What about on the finance side? How closely are you watching your cash burn? I know I've talked to a couple doctors that have taken the PPP money and they still have their whole staff on board, and they're just burning through all this cash. And it gives me some real pause to look at that. What percentage of your collections are your salary? Where do you think that should be? Who are your A players that you can't live without? If you've already laid off people, who are you bringing back? Are you bringing back everybody? Are you bringing back your A players? The reality is, many of these questions that I just asked aren't being considered. And by asking the questions, I'm not suggesting I'm right or wrong. I'm suggesting that, being that the only thing we know is that likely, highly likely, we know very little about how this is going to play out in the next 3 to 6 months. These are all very critical questions to be asking yourselves, to be thinking about. The reality is, the doctors and dentists and small business owners and restaurateurs and everybody across the board that takes the time to prepare for all these uncertain questions are going to be the ones that have the ability to pivot quickly and are going to win the day. Those that have not thought through these questions and think that everything's going to open back up and it's going to be okay are going to be the ones that, when there's a roadblock or a hurdle to jump, they're unprepared to do so. And the ones that pivot quickly and have prepared for all these different eventualities are going to be the ones that are able to capitalize on it. So as you're building your new 2020 plan, think about these two principles. If you came into 2020 already with a plan, as I've been saying for the past 6 weeks, that plan is extremely dangerous. Whatever plan you had before March 15th or March 1st, the only thing that plan can do is kill you. This is akin to, if you go to the beach, you're going to pack the beach towels and the sunscreen and an umbrella. And now you've gotten to the beach and there's a hurricane that's making landfall. And if you're still putting sunscreen lotion on your wife or husband, when that hurricane is creeping up the beach on you, there's a high probability that you're going to die. And that's the plan you had, that you were going to go to the beach and lay in the sun, is no longer any good. We need to throw that plan out. Send it to the Smithsonian. They'll frame it up for you, and you can remember it, what 2020 used to look like. You've got to prepare that right now. We need a new plan. 2020 is not going to look like what we thought in February or March, just a few months ago. And there's going to be 2 reports that I want to give you that I hope will help you as you're creating this 2020 plan. We were one of the few marketing consulting dental specific firms that lived through the 2008 recession. And we just put together a new white paper last week, Lessons from the 2008 Recession. We're going to give you that tonight. We're also going to give you a report, The Myth of Pentup Demand. And I want to suggest to you that the myth of pent-up demand may be unlikely to happen. Pent-up demand did not happen in the Great Recession. It didn't happen in the swine flu epidemic. It didn't even happen back, if you want to look at like the HIV scare of the 90s. What's interesting is that at first, most practices will have no idea about this, because there's really two things that are going to happen when practices reopen. And again, I don't know which one it's going to be. It may be completely dead. I think that's one potential outcome. The other potential outcome that I see is that there's going to be an initial demand, and it may last for 2 to 3 weeks, all the way up to maybe 1 to 2 months at most. And that's going to be all the patients that have money, still have jobs, maybe they have an emergency, or they just really are strong on their preventative health. And that is going to create a demand surge on dental practices, that pent up demand, if you want to call it that. These practices are going to think they're busier than ever, and thinking that everything is back to business as usual, or maybe even better. And, you know, I foresee there may even be dentists that are bragging about how fast they recovered from this epidemic, and then 1 or 2 months is going to elapse. And after that period, everything's going to come to a screeching halt. The hygiene schedule is going to dramatically lighten up, and the really true issues that are affecting the practice are going to shine out. So I'm not anti pent-up demand. I simply don't see doing the same things yesterday that are going to create the same results that you got yesterday. This COVID-19 is going to change the world the same way that 9/11 changed the world. You're never going to be able to stroll through TSA and walk on an airplane with a pocket knife in your pocket anymore, or who knows what you used to be able to do. And this little stinking virus is going to do the same thing. And, you know, I'll quote Dr. Ron, who, my dad, for many of you that know, Dr. Ron has graced us with his presence tonight. I'm happy to have him on here. He's already been sending me some chats here. It looks like this is the first webinar that he's joined me on here. He's been watching the replays since over the past 6 weeks. But this is what Dr. Ron said. He said this 4 weeks ago. When we reopen, hygiene is going to get hammered. It always does. It always takes the biggest hit. Every catastrophe, the first thing to go and the last thing to come back is hygiene. So the question I'll ask to you is, and this is a question to look in the mirror and ask yourself, if you're getting a lot of your restorative out of hygiene, where's it going to come from now? What's your strategy to go direct to market to get the restorative you need to fill up your schedule and fill up your bank account? If you if hygiene is its own profit center for you, some practices hygiene is productive, other practices it's more of a non-profit center. If hygiene is a big profit center for you, what are you going to do to replace that? How are you going to offset whatever scenario comes at you? Because again, I think the coronavirus is going to cause a 12 to 24 month blip. Hygiene is going to take a massive haircut in the interim. And there's very likely, and you're seeing Fords and you're seeing all kinds of really smart people start talking about this, that there's likely to be an on again, off again scenario where they open the country up and then they lock it down. And then they open up one area and they open up another, and then there's a hot spot and they lock it down. And this thing is likely to play whack-a-mole for, I think, 2 years. And the reality is the states and governments have already opened the door. They've broken the glass ceiling to using stay-at-home protective orders. I mean, imagine if these stay-at-home protective orders had been used when we had that measles outbreak a year or two ago. We would have seen it then. But now that this actions have been taken, you can fully expect to see it used again in the very near future. So if this does happen, what's your strategy? How are you going to toggle your practice on and off so that in the busy, when you can be open, you can maximize it? When you got to close, you got to be able to flip the switch. You got to be able to really pull things back, conserve cash, take care of your people, communicate with your patients, and then be ready to rock and roll again if things were to open up in, say, 4 weeks. From the 2008 recession, we found a couple critical data points. Those practices that were able to pivot very quickly slingshotted out of the 08 recession significantly faster. Those that did not change any of their actions, they hunkered down, turned off critical systems, laid people off, and just went into a survival mode, had 38% lower revenue for 6 months longer. I mean, this is the time to start working on the strategy. You've got a couple weeks, maybe 4 weeks left before your area opens back up. Let's say 6 weeks tops. This thing is going to open back up. Like it or not, I don't make the decisions. Don't argue with me about it. Don't shoot the messenger. This is how I see the world right now. And you've got to have the strategy for your people, your practice, your patients, to ensure that you've got continuity to do whatever you need to do when this thing opens. I think for everybody in here tonight, the single greatest risk you face right now is not the quarantine, but rather, what's your dental practice going to look like once you reopen? And the huge issue that every practice expects is that they're going to be competitive and they're going to prosper. Yet, very few are preparing for how they're going to accomplish that. As Bob Knight said, most people have the will to win. Few have the will to prepare to win. And that's what we're doing right now. I'm ecstatic to see hundreds of people watching my webinar again this week. But if that's all you do is watch this webinar, you're wasting your time. You're not going to prepare to win just by watching a 2-hour webinar and then strolling into your office in a few weeks. You've got to have specific and well thought out plans. I talked a few of these questions earlier. How are you handling these reappointments? What's your strategy for ensuring you get attendance in this post-COVID world? How are you prioritizing unaccepted treatment, knowing that you can make up your 2020 profit gap by producing 15 to 20% more for 4 to 6 months? I'll say that again. If you have worked out a budget, and we've helped many of our doctors do this, if you can produce 15 to 20% for 4 to 6 months following your reopen, you can make up the profit that you lost from the shutdown. The math is there. We've done it for several. If hygiene is your largest source of elective treatment, what's your go-to-market strategy? What's your plan to continue dominating your market area? Are you marketing like everybody else? The doctors and owners that take this time to prepare are going to have full schedules and full chairs and be on the balls of their feet when they come out of this. Those that don't, that just watch this webinar and do nothing, are going to have a lot of open chair and open schedule time to figure this out later. You're just trading one for the other. Let me tell you a story about that. Lee Iacocca ran Chrysler in 1979. In 1979, Chrysler was on the verge of bankruptcy. Lee Iacocca went to the Congress, he went to the US government, and he said, guys, we're about to declare bankruptcy. Next week, Chrysler will declare bankruptcy. Lee said, I need $1 billion in 1979. I need $1 billion today to avoid this. And the US government said, we've never bailed anybody out. We're not going to start now. And Lee said, okay, but understand this. If you don't give me $1 billion today, you're going to sign a check tomorrow for $2 billion because I'm about to lay off 475,000 people and you're going to write a $2 billion check for unemployment. And the rest is history. Chrysler in 1979 was the first company ever to receive a government bailout in the US. Since then, the glass ceiling is broken and dozens, hundreds probably of companies have been bailed out. There will be more. These stay-at-home orders will continue. Lee's story is the same situation you're faced with right now. You're writing a check for your time. You can spend the time today, or you can spend the time later. If you're still in business, you will have to spend the time to adapt to the new world order. That's probably not the right way to say that. No conspiracy theories here. The new way of the world. You're going to spend the time now, or you're going to spend twice the time later after you've already learned the lesson. I think it was Maxwell that said, there's no mistakes, there's only lessons. And lessons will be repeated until they're learned. And once they're learned, you know that the lesson is learned because the behavior changes. So we can learn the lesson now. We can write a check for $1 billion now, or we can write a check for $2 billion tomorrow. Downsize this for your story, right? You can write a check for your time to figure this thing out now, or you can spend your time in 2, 3, 4, 6 months after you've already taken a bloodbath for a few months, losing more production. I would suggest that the former might be the better strategy. Not streamlining and creating efficient systems during these recessions, we saw this in the last recession too, is going to lead to a more significant decline that could take even 5 to 8 years to recover. We saw practices out of the 08 recession that didn't get back to their previous numbers until 2014 or 2015. That was not normal, but we did see that in some practices. That comes from a number of things: loss of new patients, new regulations. There's going to be new financial challenges coming out of this COVID crisis. I am predicting that dental insurers are going to drop reimbursements further to recoup some of their lost profits. I think it's very, 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 very unlikely that there is a PPE reimbursement line. And if I'm wrong, I'll be the first in line to say Colin was wrong on that. I think that's extremely unlikely. And I think it's most likely that they run the opposite direction and they actually clamp down on reimbursements more. So if you're very insurance dependent, how are you going to negotiate this when you have unemployment rates going up, which means you have less patients that even have insurance to spend? What are you going to do to shore up your collections if unemployment's up and reimbursement rates for the patients that do have insurance is down? How are you going to pivot? Where are you going to go find new patients, and what are they going to do? Let's talk a little bit about the states that are opening up. Indiana, Colorado, and Georgia have officially released open dates in April. I've color-coded them red because red is the hottest. It's just, if you're in a fire, red's the hottest. Maybe not on blue or white, but whatever. So red is the states that are opening up in the next week. Orange are the states that are opening up in the week after that. Tennessee and Texas have given us first week of May open dates. This thing is going to be a domino effect. When these states start opening up and you get that lieutenant governor out of Texas, do I have any Texans in here tonight? Give me a chat. Give me a hoorah on chat if you're from Texas. I love your lieutenant governor. He speaks very plainly. He does not mince his words, and you always know where he stands. And that's more than I can say for some other politicians in other parts of the country. My state included in that cohort. Our governor likes to play the political game, and I just like somebody a little more plain spoken. Dr. Quincy, yeah, great to have you here. So you're going to see this thing be a domino effect. Let me show you a little bit about patient demand in the past 6 weeks. You may not be able to read these small words on the bottom. This graph starts March 1st, and this ends April 20th. This ran through the end of Monday. These are the new patient opportunities that we have verified across our clients. So part of what SmartBox does is we monitor every call coming in to every client we have. We're monitoring them to mark them as new patients, existing patients, scheduled, not scheduled. Is Susie doing her job at the front desk? Oh man, Marcy's killing it. She's appointed 90% of the new patient calls she's taken. All that data gets broken down, and this is the aggregate data. So you can see back here, March quickly dropped for many practices across the country. I show you this to show you Monday's new patient opportunity number. This spike here is very, very interesting. This is a spike that's on par with the second week of March back here. I don't predict the future. I don't have a crystal ball, but I am optimistic that the demand for dentistry appears to be coming back. Now, back into the pent-up demand line, right? Is there a 2 or 4 week surge and then reality sets in? Or maybe is there no pent-up demand for you? I don't know, but I think if you're certain about what's going to happen, that means you're not willing to consider that you may be wrong. And I think that's a very dangerous position to put your staff and yourself in. I think you should prepare for all of the possible outcomes. We can always hope for the best, but we need to have preparations made for the worst. And the worst is, what if it doesn't come back? What if it extends 3 months longer than before, right? Excuse me. We need to think through all these things. Last week, we had 4 strategies. This week, we have 7. One of these 7 is I'm going to do a 1-slide recap on the 4-phase marketing plan we rolled out last week. I'm going to show you, if you want to just go see that 4-phase marketing plan, I'm going to give you the link that you can go get that on. I already gave you the lessons from the 2008 recession white paper. I'm going to send you that link again at the end. We're going to talk about the myth of pent-up demand. That's going to be an ongoing topic tonight. Difficult conversations. The whole world is having difficult conversations right now. So we're going to talk through that a little bit. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. 10 vital steps to thriving during difficult times. If you were on here last week, you already had an opportunity to get a copy of this guide. I'm going to throw it at you again tonight and make sure everybody that got it. Post-COVID-19 practice differentiation. This is going to be the next thing we get into, and this is going to be a big piece for tonight. And then we're going to end with what I call the practice growth paradox. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the paradox of practice growth is and why it's paradoxical. We've got a lot of current clients on here tonight. I see a lot of familiar names. I also see a lot of familiar names of guys that I've talked to before but aren't clients. And all of these strategies apply equally. We have clients in 49 states, still looking for one in Alaska. I'd love to get back up to Alaska. If you saw last week's presentation, I talked about why I love going to Alaska and the outdoors and wilderness and all that so much. So if you're in Alaska, there might be a special deal on the table for you. But we've got clients in 49 states in everywhere from major metro areas to super rural in the middle of nowhere practices. So some of the things I'm going to talk about tonight may not apply specifically to every situation that's out there. Always and never rarely happen. But everything we have in here is being used somewhere in some practice across our client base. So let's jump in. Post-COVID-19 practice differentiation. I've heard that there's really 2 camps of people that I've been hearing. There's 2 messages, 2 themes that I've been hearing. The one theme I'm going to call the clinician. And the clinician is saying, I'm going to have to spend $100,000 in the next 12 months to maintain complete sterility and safety on everything. I'm going to have to buy N95 masks and face covers and HEPA filters and all this stuff. And it's going to cost me $100,000. The other camp that I hear are the guys that are on the other end of the spectrum, and they say, man, this is silly. This thing's just like the flu. The San Diego Institute released some study, and they say the mortality rate on this thing is 0.1%, and this is all silly, and we shouldn't have to do it. And I think both camps are very, very wrong. And here's why I think that. The differentiation and the marketing that you do in your practice, the purpose of it is to attract existing and attract new patients. There's only 2 reasons you should spend money in your practice: to service existing patients and maintain existing patients, and to get new patients. That's the only 2 reasons that we want to spend money in a dental practice. And if you're in either of those camps, you're not focused on those 2 things. You're focused on spending money for the pure safety factor, or you're saying I shouldn't have to spend the money because it's not fair, or it's not right, or it's not how I look at the world. And neither of those two things are how your patients are viewing the world right now. All of your patients are watching every news that's out there. And right or wrong, good or bad, your patients are going to have a major concern about their safety in the world, not just in your practice, but in the whole world. The reason to do PPE and all this enhancement stuff is to stay safe. But if you're not marketing that safety as an attribute, your patients aren't going to know, and it's not going to matter. You could spend $100,000, you could spend $500,000 in your practice, but if it's not being communicated, and I'm going to show you how to communicate that tonight, it doesn't matter. It's all spent in vain, right? Cool new shiny objects. I know I've been guilty of this. I'll be the first one in line to say I've done that. I thought if I bought some cool new thing that everybody was going to want it. Anybody else want to be next in line to admit to thinking that their customers cared about some cool new shiny object? Anybody bought a laser that sat in the closet for 10 years and they only used it once? That's kind of the story. Yeah, a couple people here raising their hand. And that's the same way with the PPE. We have to be safe, but you've also got to find a way to communicate that. Yeah, more people. Yeah, love it. Yeah, thanks for, I mean, it happens, right? We've all done it. We've all been guilty. How are you going to relate that to your patients? We've got an enhanced safety and security letter. I've been working on this with Dr. Ron for about a week now, and this is a draft that we're giving away tonight at this link, and I'm going to send you the link afterwards. This is something you can mail out to your patients. You can customize it for you. You'll see when you get the letter how and where you need to tweak it. You all may not have painted your office like Dr. Ron did. You all may not have installed some new flooring while you were closed like Dr. Ron did. That's okay. That's not the important stuff. The important stuff is the safety and security message that you're relaying. This is stuff that needs to be mailed out to your patients. It needs to be text to them. You need to reinforce this. Do an email blast to your list. Create a sign for your front door that has this information on it, because we don't want patients strolling into our office if we're going to maintain a tight control over the environment. Extra people should wait in the car, text or call to come in. If you're a client of ours, we are looking at rolling out texting and integrating it into all the Practice HQ, all the phone system that we have. We're going to be rolling out texting. It's not ready yet, so don't overwhelm your CSM asking for why, but it's coming. We're going to have that figured out in short order. Remove the communal items for your waiting room. Add this stuff to your social media. Put it on your website. Even in your marketing and media that's rolling out, you need to have this enhanced safety and security plan out there. No contact thermometers. Go buy a few of these. Buy 3 of them. There's 100 different brands on Amazon, and you need to be taking people's temperature when they come in the door. This is how you're going to not only ensure you have a safe environment, but you're going to demonstrate for your patients that they are in a safe environment, right? How many people have ever walked into a restaurant and asked a waiter or a waitress to wipe down the table because they didn't believe that it was clean? I know I have. I've walked in and, man, maybe I see a little dust bunny in the corner of the room, and as soon as we sit down, I ask our waitress, hey, can you come wipe this table down? And there's nothing on the table. The table looks fine. I do that because maybe I'm a little bit of a clean freak, but I do it because I want to know it's clean. It's not about reality. It has nothing to do with reality. They may have alcohol wiped the whole booth right before I walked in, but I want to see it. And that's what your patients need to do too. Make sure you check their temperature before they walk in. When you go out to the car to get them, check their temperature right there. And now they know that everybody coming into the office, everybody is okay, right? You've all got masks on. Here's another idea. There's 2 great models. Your local HVAC contractor If you're in the Louisville, Kentucky area, I can recommend a good one to you. If you're not, these are two things that are carried by most HVAC distributors that you need to install. They cost about $800 per HVAC system. I'm getting one installed here in my house this week. We're getting them installed at our office. Dr. Ron just got to put in his office. I got several clients. Mitch Friedman up in New England area got his installed as well this week. These are great units that not only work, but that you can talk to your patients about and say that you've gotten this done. It kills 99% of all this stuff, and it installs straight in your HVAC system. You want to install it. What my HVAC guy says, you want to put it right on top of the A coil, and that's where these things install at. It's about $800 per unit. Get one for every unit. If you got 2 units in your office, it's $1,600. And this is a very marketable attribute that you can say. If you go out to Remy Halo, seems to be the popular one. If you go out to their website, you can get the whole write-up on how great it is and all that stuff. And you can pop in there and get it. These Aegis aerosol backstations, I found these this week. We had a couple doctors that are buying them. This is a HEPA grade filtration unit that is freestanding. And if you go to their website, they got a really cool video where they're shooting smoke around the suction unit. And before they turn on the suction unit, you know, the smoke's going everywhere. And then they turn this thing on and all the smoke goes straight into the filter. Now, you know, and I know that when you get that Cavitron going, it may not capture this backstation may not capture all of that aerosol stuff. And I understand that. I'm not suggesting here that any of these are a 100% solution. If you're looking for 100% certainty, I don't think there's 100% certainty until there's a vaccine and we have herd immunity. So if you're going to keep your office closed until there's 100% certainty, I think you're going to be closed for a really long time, because the testing is, I don't foresee the COVID testing to be any more robust than the flu testing. I've been deathly sick with the flu a couple times, and you go and get tested and they're like, oh, it's not the flu. You tested negative. I'm like, there's no way. I got every symptom, and the flu, everybody else in my house has the flu, and they tested positive, and you're telling me I test negative. That's just not possible. It's highly unlikely. And I think the same thing's going to happen with this coronavirus. Testing it's probably going to improve. It's not great right now, but it's not going to be 100%. And if your threshold is 100%, then you just need to plan to close. And I don't say this, this is just the way I see the world. If 100% is your threshold, you're going to be closed for a long time. And I think we need a risk-based approach. And what I'm trying to give you tonight is a few tools that can give you a risk-based approach to how can I open up and help my patients and help my team, and also limit the exposure of this whole thing and still make a living myself. That's what I'm trying to do here. I know not everybody's going to agree with me, and everybody has different thresholds on this. And I understand that. I'm okay with that. Let me show you another really cool tool I found. This is an N95 mask decontamination system. I'm in talks with CPAC right now. We may actually even offer this for sale. We're getting set up as a distributor for this, which we don't normally do product stuff, but we may actually go through with this because it's a really cool unit. And here's why. They've produced this thing so quickly because it was already available. This is a sterilization system. And right now, all they've done is adjusted the firmware on it, the software programming, to limit it to 155 degrees Fahrenheit, right? They've already got FDA approval. And when this thing's all over, you can call them up, and for $300, they will send you the new software that will lift the heat limit on this thing up to 375. So it turns it into a sterilizer. So after you've bought it, it's not like it's only for this COVID crisis. You can repurpose it down the road. So I don't know if we're going to move forward with reselling that. I'll let you guys know here in a day or two. If we get enough interest, if you have interest in this, shoot me an email or shoot me a message, and I'll let you know what pans out with that. Here's a cool tool I found for your team. You guys probably all know what mask to use. But this is a really nice printable PDF. If you go to this link right here, it's a one-page PDF, and it explains, based on what you're doing or your hygienist is doing, which mask they need. I think there's going to be a problem with everybody taking N95 masks when you reopen. And not every patient and every procedure needs an N95 expensive mask. So this might be something you hang up in the storage room where you keep your supplies at, and just help to educate your team on what do they really need to be safe. We don't always need to be using the expensive masks just because they're available there. Again, a risk-based approach to this thing. So this is a printable version that you can swipe and steal. We've had a bunch of practices. You probably already use this in your practice, but Cavicide is a great product. I'm sure there's 100 others. We're not getting endorsed for any products here, guys. I'm not getting a penny. I'm not getting paid. I'm not making any money. I'm just trying to share with you some information of the marketing attributes of what other practices have done. This is what they're doing. In the patient safety and security letter, right back here, you can see all these things talked about. So if you want to convey this type of safety and security to your patients, these are just some of the things we're going to talk about here. When you're wiping down your operatories, there's two things you need to do. Before a new patient sits down in the chair, they need to watch you wipe everything down. This is part of demonstrating to them how serious you take their safety. It's not just about, oh, we are sterilizing it and they hope that it's done right. They need to stand there in the doorway of your operatory while you wipe everything they're going to touch down right in front of them. And then before they leave, you need to do the same thing. They need to see as they're leaving that you're wiping it down as well. And that's going to give them assurance, right? Before this, everybody assumed your instruments were sterile. Don't take those instruments out of the bag until you're right in front of the patient. Open the sterilized bag in front of the patient so they see it. They're not going to take this stuff for granted anymore. Little things like this will demonstrate to them that you are truly taking this seriously. If you don't, they're not going to assume it. They're going to ask questions, or they're secretly going to wonder, and then they're just going to ghost you. They're not going to schedule their next appointment. You're never going to hear back from them. And you know, like many patients that switch practices or just don't come back. They may just wait a year and never come back because they didn't believe you. Cool. All right, let's move forward. Difficult conversations. Lord knows there's plenty of difficult conversations happening right now. Let me ask the question. How many of you have had this thought, or you've heard this before? A coworker of mine is not doing their job and it's affecting my work. Anybody thought that before? Anybody want to raise their hand and either share a story or talk about this a little bit? Yeah, of course, right? How about, have you ever had an employee tell you, or maybe if you were an employee or you are an associate, my boss isn't giving me direction and I don't know what to do? Yeah, right? I mean, we've all heard this. This project has goals that aren't achievable, or maybe I'm not being listened to, right? Something else that would comment. One of my people, who's ever done this? Who's ever gone into full dominator mode and said, you're not doing your job and you need to shape up or ship out? Who's ever had that thought? Or maybe even said it to somebody. You need to get your stuff together or you're not going to be employed here, right? Yeah, a bunch of people. Yeah, so these are the difficult conversations that we all have to have. We have them in our work. We have them in our families. We have them at home. We have them with our friends. And based on who the audience is, whoever we're talking to, yeah, the conversation might change a little bit. I did a difficult conversations presentation. It was about 30 minutes long. And given that everything that's going through tonight, with all this crisis and people being laid off and coming back and all this turmoil, I thought this is one of the things that we have in our Success Academy. And I thought this would be a very valuable tool. If you go out to this link, you can get two things. You can watch the video of me presenting and talking through this, and then you can also download the slide deck. So if you can't see the slide deck in the video, or you just want something, maybe you want to print it off and give your own presentation to your people. Maybe you want to take the slide deck and do your own PowerPoint, whatever you want to do. We're giving away the difficult conversations, the video of me doing it, as well as our slide deck, and you can get it here at this link. Again, I'll send this out later. I see there's already requests coming through in my email, that I've got up here on my second screen for a bunch of this stuff. I'm going to reply. I'm going to get all this out to you. I'm going to send you the links. Don't worry. This would be a very good presentation to have the leader, the visionary of your practice. If that's you, if you're the owner and the visionary, this is a great thing for you to watch. It might actually not even be 30 minutes. It might be 20 minutes. It's not super long. It's pretty concise. And it's all about support and challenge. If you're not familiar with the support and challenge matrix, this is essentially what it is here on the right side. If you are not supporting people and you're giving them a high amount of challenge, that means you're dominating them. On the flip side, if you're overly supporting them and never challenging them, then you're just enabling them. And that creates a culture of mistrust, right? If you are not talking to your people in a productive way about what they need to improve, you're protecting them. And then, of course, there's the abdicator who doesn't challenge his people and doesn't support his people. This quick, difficult conversations video is going to give you everything you need to know about the 4 types of support and challenge and how to get you up into the Liberator, where you have high support, but also a very high level of challenge, a high level of expectations for your staff, but they're aligned with you and you both know what the outcome needs to be. In a lot of practices I go into, if I ask the doctor and the staff separately, they give me different answers. And that always leads to some kind of drama down the road. Anytime there's drama in my business, if I'm in a leadership meeting and we're talking about there's something going on, one of the teams, there's some kind of misalignment or there's some kind of drama, I have kind of a joke that I say. And the joke is this: what's it going to cost? It's not really a joke. It's actually pretty serious. Drama costs money. Every time there's drama, it's costing you money. Just get your checkbook out. It's like Lee Iacocca's story. You can write me $1 billion check today, or you can write me a $2 billion check tomorrow. If there's drama today, you can either write the check today to fix the drama, or you can write a $2 check tomorrow to deal with it tomorrow. But you're going to write the check, right? So I would encourage everybody here to go watch this. There's no opt-in. You just go click on it and watch it, and it's going to be a very good presentation that you probably want to give to your team. If you're bringing your team back, make sure when you bring them back from this COVID crisis that you guys are aligned and you're on the same page, that there's no misconceptions. You're in absolute lockstep on what has to happen. If you were at 30 or 40 or 50% collections, labor of your collections, if 35 or 40 or 45% of your collections went to labor in the past, I'm going to suggest that you be very, very cautious about bringing all of your people back. That level of labor in most dental practices is unsustainable, and it leads to cash flow issues. It leads to undercompensating your A players, and then you have A player turnover. You simply can't compensate people well enough to retain them if 40% of your collections is going to paying labor. You got too many people and you're spreading the peanut butter too thin. So I would encourage everybody to go watch this. I'm not going to play it tonight. We got plenty of content to go 2 hours without doing this. 10 vital steps to thriving during difficult times. I rolled some of this out last week, but I want to do a quick recap and show you guys how you can get this. There's a lot of new faces on here tonight, and I'm going to run through this very quickly. Step 1, if you want this, go to 10stepstothrive.com and you can download it. Step 1 is our Survive and Thrive Guide. We released this at the outset of this COVID-19 crisis. This is going to tell you all about the base level stuff you need to do to get your expenses and your overhead quickly in order. Student loans that can be deferred, utilities, mortgages, all the baseline stuff that came out early on. Step 2, cash is oxygen. You can go 2 or 3 minutes without oxygen, and it's the same with cash. When you run out of cash, you run out of business. You have to understand if you're in a situation of cash burn right now. I don't care if it's your money, if it's your wife's money, your Uncle Eddie's money, or the government's PPP money. If you're burning cash, you need to know how long that's going to last for. This is a cash burn calculator that you can go plug your numbers into. It's at 10stepstothrive.com. We're giving all this. It's all packaged up. You can download it, edit it, do all the stuff to get all of your numbers in here so you can understand, what if this thing does go 3 months longer? What if Pentup Demand doesn't exist? What if it does? Great, let's hope for a better case scenario, and then we end up ahead. But if you don't prepare for it and you run out of cash, your practice is done. And if you're in that kind of situation and you don't have enough money on the sidelines that you can inject, or maybe your cash burn is going to overshoot the cash on the sidelines that you have, you've got to understand all of your assumptions. And in a couple hours, you can have this cash burn calculator figured out. And remember that perfection is the enemy of progress. This cash burn calculator, most of our practices, they're changing it every week based on income they get, or expenses that change, or timelines that change. This thing is never perfect. It's never done. It's evolving. It's a forecast. You're always looking 13 weeks into the future. So perfection is the enemy of progress with this thing. That you just got to get started. The first step is just getting started and plug your numbers in. Plug them in and look at what it looks like. If you don't like how it looks, and it's got a little visual trend line that'll show you, where's my cash going? Is it going up or is it going down? If it's going down and you don't like that, now you can go in and you can say, oh gosh, you know, maybe I need to produce another 10,000 this month in emergencies. That rights my ship. Okay, great. Now, how am I going to do that? Where am I going to go? Now, you know, if I need 10,000 more bucks in production, okay, now let's go figure out how to make that happen. The spreadsheet doesn't give you the answers. It only gives you the direction you need to march. SBA Loan Strategy update, right? I've been talking about this every week. I think there's a major CPA firm that's advising doctors not to get the PPP. And I've said it now for a couple weeks in a row. I think that's galactically stupid. I think a 1% interest loan for 2 years is a gift. And even if you don't use it, if you want to park some cash on the sidelines as a safety net, I think everybody should go get the PPP, even if there was no forgiveness. If you get $100,000 on the PPP, it costs you 1% for 2 years. It costs you $2,000 to have another $100,000 cash cushion. I think that's really smart. And if you do get forgiveness, which you likely will get some portion of it forgiven, you know, the forgiveness ends June 30th, which means May 1st would be the beginning of the 8-week period preceding June 30th. So I think everybody ought to be applying, especially this thing just got refunded. They just put another $480 billion into the economy today, 320 billion of it. They refunded the PPP, and they're setting aside another $60 billion for small lenders and community financial institutions. They've also refunded $60 billion for the EIDL loans, $25 billion for testing, $75 billion for hospitals. I mean, they're throwing money around this thing. It's just raining money out of DC right now. And all this runs out June 30th, the forgivability portion. So my advice, I'm not a CPA and I'm not an attorney. This is what I think from my business point of view. Everybody should get the PPP on or after May 1st, run the 8 weeks, spend what you can, do it smartly, and then you got a cash cushion. Return the money if you don't want it at that point. Worst case is it becomes a working capital line of credit, so to speak, at 1% interest. Best case, you get partial or full forgiveness, and depending on your state and when you reopen, this is a huge cash infusion to help get you going. So I don't think there's a bad way to go with this PPP. The only bad thing is you spend the money and then it turns into a loan that you have to pay back. Well, make sure whatever money you spend wisely. If you still have your whole team on board and you're burning through the PPP at a full rate just to keep them on the payroll, maybe you reconsider that trajectory and think about it and consider other options. There's other ways to do it. Rent and mortgage deferment. This was a letter we wrote for one of our clients, and I had a lot of people request this letter. If you want a template letter that you can just plug your information into and send to your landlord or send to your bank. Almost all banks right now are giving some kind of deferment. A lot of banks I'm talking to are giving principal and interest deferment. Fire this off to your bank if you need help. Keep this in your tool belt. This COVID-19 crisis is not over, right? If you want to send it to your landlord, fire it off to your landlord. You can go get a copy of the letter. It's in Google Docs. And again, I'll send you this link at the end of the presentation. I want to talk about the tale of two practices, and I show you this to show you the power of understanding the numbers in your practice. If you take the average dentist, and these are averages based on benchmarking of 9,000 dental practices done in 2019 in the United States, all practices are doing at least 700,000, 650,000 a year, I think was the number on the benchmark. So there's no startup practices in this benchmark. The average dentist answered 70% of their phone calls during business hours. They appointed at the average percent. Patients attended those appointments at the average. The patients accepted treatment at the average. And then the average visit value was around $1,500 per patient. The average dentist, if you take all the averages and you put 100 new patients through their funnel, the average dentist got $19,500 of production collections out of 100 new patient opportunities. That's average. Now, I want to show you what we call the 5 A's dentist. And the power of the 5 A's, which is our money funnel teaching philosophy and concept, is that we're not trying to move mountains here. We need to move each number a meager 10%. Instead of answering 70% of the calls, what if we answer 80%? Instead of appointing at 55%, what if we appoint at 65%, right? Instead of patients attending at 80%, what if they attend at 90%? All these numbers are very, very achievable. All of them. We have practices that are answering 100% of their calls. Multiple practices answering 100% of their calls. We have 98% attendance rates, 80% appoint rates. So the power is in the strategies, and the data drives the strategy. And the difference is when you can increase each stage 10%, and then you can take your average visit value and bump it 20%. So we figure out, how are we going to get acceptance on $1,800 per patient per year instead of $1,500? Maybe there's some sealants, maybe there's some mouth guard, maybe there's a small cavity that they didn't accept. Maybe I don't know. I'm not looking at this from a clinical point of view. I'm looking at this from a numbers and a strategy point of view. When you can move these numbers a meager 10%, you can double your revenue out of your new patients. And if you can move the last two stages a little bit more, you can double and a half, right? 158%. This is the power of the 5 A's. These are the metrics that you need to be looking at in your practice. There's a really tragic story that just happened that probably all of you are familiar with. We lost a basketball legend. We lost Kobe Bryant. Kobe died tragically a month or two ago in a helicopter crash. His pilot was flying through some fog, could not see where he was going. And 9 people on board that helicopter died that day. Kobe's pilot made the error of flying without a dashboard. If Kobe had had a dial or a gauge or a dashboard that showed him that there was a mountain in front of him, he would have responded to that data and made the necessary adjustments to pull up. But he didn't. He was flying blind. And if you're flying your practice blind and you don't have the same gauges and metrics, you too are going to crash into a mountain. And I don't want to see that happen to anybody. I was a huge Kobe fan. I loved seeing back in the day when him and Jordan and the All-Stars would line up, and that was amazing. He was an amazing person. He gave back to his community. You've got to have dashboards and dials and gauges in your practice. And these 5, the 5 A's, answer, appoint, attend, accept, and average, are 5 of the critical things you need to be looking at. And to break this out a little bit further, we need to see accepted on both hygiene and restorative separately. And this is all data that if you're a client, we've got it in our practice HQ and within Dental Intel that we're syncing all this data together. And when you can let the data guide you, right? You can't take this to your front office staff and say, you need to answer 10% more of the calls. That doesn't work. If you've tried that before, your staff probably rebelled against you. They probably had a coup d'etat. But if you go to your staff and say, hey, we need to improve this, and here is the Batline handbook, so you can have the strategies, and I'm going to help you figure this thing out. We're going to go through this and figure out how are we going to answer 10% more of these calls. And then we've got the strategy, and you're supporting, right? You can't just take a challenge to your team without the support. That is why spreadsheet consulting always fails. Spreadsheet consulting, which is what I call what some consultants do when they just say, oh, just go do this, is all challenge with no support. We've got to support our people. You got to support your teams. And we do this through all the different tools. If you need to know how to answer and appoint, we've got a Batline handbook. If you need to know how to get appoint and attend, we've got our pre-appointment report. We focus on the dentist performance framework, and there's 5 major pieces that contribute to this. As a marketing agency at heart, which is what I started SmartBox as, attracting more and better patients was the very first thing we did. But it's also about, how do we increase patient value? How do we retain them for life? How are we going to grow profits? And then how are we also going to build a motivated and productive team? How am I going to build accountability within the team? Out of these 5, I would encourage you to do this. Pick 1, pick 2, but don't pick more. Pick 1 or 2 that you really want to focus on when you reopen. Figure out, prioritize. What are you already doing great? Maybe you've got a great team. Maybe you've got great systems in your practice already. Maybe you've got great patients. Pick one of these and then start developing the strategies to move the needle so that your gauges reflect the change that you're making. If you don't make the change, you're not going to see. If Kobe's pilot had pulled back on the stick, the gauge would have read differently. But instead, he didn't have a gauge, and he was just flying around blind. And that works if you can see. But right now, we're all walking through a very foggy area, and we're going to be coming out of this. When we can focus on one or two areas, it builds an immense amount of power, right? I'm not going to talk about this in depth because I'm going to give you all of this information in our 10 Steps to Thrive. How to build your own team-driven practice. How to use Zoom and Uber right now to remotely level up your team. We're going to give you the Success Academy workbook. New for this week, this is new. If you've been on here in past weeks, you don't have this. Our Success Academy workbook, we've split apart. There's now a doctor workbook and a team workbook. You can go download it here at 10stepstothrive.com. We're also going to give you our money funnel evaluation and report. This is one of the first things you probably want to do is figure out where you're at. Get your team involved on the evaluation. Get their input and feedback. Remember, a 10% increase across each of the 5 A's will double the money that's coming from your new patients. Now we need the strategies. What are the strategies that are going to allow us an incremental 10% increase? And that's where all these resources are going to come in. And they're going to support you as you go through this journey. The most important thing is that you have gauges. You have a dashboard. If you are a client of ours, you know that we've got our Practice HQ where we're benchmarking your practice. We're syncing with Dental Intel to make sure you know what's going on, that you're not flying blind. Most cash crunches in dental practices are foreseeable. They're always foreseeable. And they're always foreseeable before the cash crunch occurs. Kobe's pilot, if he had had a gauge or a dial that gave him elevation or a topographical map, that mountain would have been foreseeable. But it wasn't foreseeable because he was flying blind. What these give you is the ability to fly and know how you're flying before that ride starts to get bumpy. I don't mean to, I certainly don't have any intention. I love Kobe. And I had somebody say once, man, you're trying to like make this out to be the punchline in your story. And I'm not. What I am trying to do is to emphasize the importance of having dials in your practice. Money funnel calculator. You can plug in, if you're a dentist, we've got our marketing maximizer calculator. You plug all your marketing in and it tells you how you're performing. If you're an orthodontist, we've got our ortho patient life cycle. Orthodontists are a little bit easier than dentists. You just have less dials to look at. You have less things going on. You don't have recalls and generally a lot of the things that dentists have to deal with, the complexities of a dental practice. Orthodontists are streamlined. It's a more simple business model. So we've developed this for both. If you want the 5 A's for dentists, get this. If you want the 5 A's for orthodontists, get this. You can get both of this link here. It's not too late to make the same profit this year as you did last year. I'll tell you, you're 6 weeks in right now. The dentists that were on top of this 6 weeks ago, planning their expenses, figuring out how they're going to prop up lost revenue, are now 6 weeks ahead of you. If you've been working on this for 6 weeks, kudos to you. You are working to avoid the hurricane. But I will say, I've done some budgets in the last week, that it is still possible with some of the scenarios we've seen to come close to making the same money you did this year as you did last year. It's going to take more work now than it did 6 weeks ago. It's going to take a lot more work if you wait another 6 weeks, right? The 5 A's play into this an immense amount. This particular example we did about 5 weeks ago, It was a $1.3 million practice. The doctor took home a little bit shy of 600. And in the COVID-19 budget scenario, he was taking home about 560. And if you do the work, you will understand your assumptions to make, you're going to have to grow your collections 15 to 20% for 16 to 20 weeks in order to overcome the shutdown, right? Virtual smile assessment. We've been pushing this. If you're a client, we'll give it to you. If you're not a client, we'll give you the strategy guide. But if you're not a client, we can't give you our technology. So we can give you the strategy guide and show you a little bit more about it. Step 8, patient rescheduling strategies. We released this last week. What is a pre-appointment worth in your practice? What is phantom demand? What effect do pre-appointments and phantom demand have on your money funnel? How do you know if you're leaving $17,000 to $34,000 on the table every month because of your pre-appointment strategies? We've analyzed the data around pre-appointing your patients. And I've given you, in this report, I'm going to give you a 4-question, 60-second evaluation so that you can evaluate if this is a problem in your practice. And you'll be able to tell after this. And then if it is, 2 must-haves to fix it. I've been getting this question a lot. Should I increase or decrease my fees? The short answer is you should never decrease your fees. The other short answer is you should always increase your fees. And the reason is, let's take a typical practice that has, let's say, a 45% doctor take home, 45% profit margin. If you decide that you need to cut your prices, your fees 10%, and you have a 45% profit margin, that means you need to do 23% more work. You need to collect 23% more to make the same money. And that's why the short answer is no, you should not discount your fees. Let me give you the other side of the scenario. If you have a 45% profit margin and you raise your fees 10%, right? Now you can do 18% less work and still make the same money. You can see almost 20% less patients if you raise your fees 10% and still make the exact same money. And the reality is, if you raise your fees 10%, you're not going to lose 20% of your patients. You might lose 5 or 10% of your patients, which means you raise your fees, you do less work, and you make more money. So I'm going to give you our fee calculator, 10stepstothrive.com. You can pop out there and get this. If you're a current client, you already know all this stuff. We got a 6-step playbook that we're going to slingshot you guys back on this. We're also rolling out our A-player hiring system because there's going to be a lot of hiring to be done, and our 6 steps to insurance independence because insurability rates are going to go down with unemployment going up. And how do you navigate a fee-for-service environment to make sure that you're shoring up whatever area of your practice you need to shore up? If you've got dental intel already, we can hook you up with local med for free. If you got local med, we can hook you up with dental intel for free. Success Academy, we're giving away, if you're not a client yet, let me tell you about what we're doing. A very similar philosophy, but we're offering the same strategies because this is what is going to slingshot you out of this. You're going to need to rehire people. A players are going to be abundant in a few weeks when you start opening, and hiring the right people is critical. So we're rolling out our A player hiring system. We're also rolling out our insurance independent system. We also want to we have a limited number of slots for development right now available. We're having a huge surge of intake of new clients right now. What we're offering to new clients, future clients, is that if you want to go ahead and get your development on your marketing started, we'll go ahead and do that. So if you have interest in learning more about that, shoot me an email. You've got my email address. I've sent you 100 emails probably over the past 4 weeks. Shoot me an email and I can tell you more about what that's like. But we're willing to help all of you guys, current clients and future clients, through this thing. And we're all in the same boat together. From last week, I talked about our 20-week 4-phase slingshot back marketing plan. If you want this thing, you can now go watch this a la carte. bit.ly/SB20 sling. And again, I'm going to send this link out here in just a few minutes. The practices that implement these strategies are going to be the ones that slingshot back. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think anybody else does either. But those doctors and practices that can pivot quickly are going to be the ones that thrive. And for the rest of the practices that have a lot of certainty, the practices that are unwilling to admit that maybe they don't have all the answers, the Warren Buffett quote is going to be in full effect. When the tide goes out, you're going to see who's been swimming naked. When this thing opens back up, you're going to see who's been swimming naked. Let me tell you some really, really interesting shit that's happened lately. Richard Branson is no longer a billionaire. In 2 weeks, Richard Branson, Virgin everything, he went from being a billionaire to not. Richard Branson right now is looking for a lender to loan him money on his private Necker Island down in the Caribbean. Necker Island is the last asset that Richard Branson has that is unencumbered, that's unmortgaged. And he's looking for somebody to loan him money. Oil right now is at negative $37 a barrel for next month in the futures. The owner, let me give you some more. This you may not know this. The owner of the Houston Rockets is worth $4.4 billion. He's one of Forbes 400 richest Americans. If you looked at him a month or two ago, you would have thought that Richard Branson and the owner of the Houston Rockets had life by the tail, and they were just killing it. Right now, the owner of the Houston Rockets, who's got a name I can't pronounce, he's trying to raise $250 million from private investors. He's willing to pay 15% interest, and he's willing to let you deduct the first interest payment from the first month from your capital contribution that you're putting in. No banks will loan him money. He's worth $4.4 billion, and he's completely cash poor. He has no cash, and he needs to raise $250 million in the private market in order to pay his bills right now. Unbelievable what's going on right now. Let me ask you a question. What decisions would you have made 9 to 12 months ago to mitigate the pain that you're now suffering if you knew this was going to happen? That's the question I'm asking right now. What would you do differently? What would you have done differently 9 to 12 months ago if you had known this was going to happen? What would Richard Branson have done differently 9 to 12 months ago? What would the owner of the Houston Rockets have done differently 9 to 12 months ago? Well, I tell you, they would have a lot of cash. And they would have made some different decisions regarding their lifestyle, around their practices, around their businesses. This glass ceiling of businesses being shut down has been broken. And as these localized hotspots, which are going to reoccur, we've seen it happen in all the other countries, where they shut down and then they open up, and then the pandemic comes out again, and they have to shut places down again. These stay-at-home orders and this government shutdown is going to reoccur. So let me ask you that question a different way. What decisions do you need to make today to accommodate the second shutdown in 9 to 12 months? I think if you can answer that question and you can look in the mirror, that is a really, really important question to figure out. If 9 to 12 months ago you would have made different decisions, then what are you doing today? Because this thing is going to happen in another 9 to 12 months. And it's going to happen whether you're still doing what you're doing. It's going to happen independent of any decisions you make. And you know what? If it doesn't happen and I'm wrong, I'll be on this podcast and I'll say I'm wrong. And then you'll be in a better position than you thought you were going to be in. Right? I told you at the beginning I was going to talk a little bit about the practice growth paradox. This is the new data, new study that we've come out with. And we've gone through and analyzed a bunch of our practices. And we're finding that based around the money funnel and the benchmarks and averages, in an average practice, and let's use a 10 to 20 new patient per month as an example, they're also missing out on 7 to 18 additional new patients because of their money funnel that they don't even realize they're not getting. And I go in a lot of practices. I have friends that are dentists. There's nothing more frustrating for a dentist to show up at work every day and feel like there's some kind of invisible ceiling on production and success that they just can't seem to punch through. We call this the practice growth paradox. And it's a paradox because even though your practice has grown to be a success, it just doesn't feel that way some days. And, when you have a successful practice, there's an upward momentum that exists when it comes to your expenses and your personal lifestyle. And the reality is those two things are rising. Sometimes they rise slowly. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they rise very quickly. But lifestyle and expenses are always going up for everybody. Today is the cheapest day it's ever going to be. A plateaued practice ends up feeling like you're stuck in a basement that's filling up with water and you can't get out. And the expenses keep rising and that upward pressure keeps pushing down on your profit margins. And there's only so much time before the water fills up. So this practice growth paradox is I think it's around a 12-page analysis that we put together around this paradox that we see it. The paradox of always being busy is what I open this up with saying, busy versus productive. The power of compound interest in your practice. Part of this is going to be talking about the money funnel. There is a stat that we have surveyed that 91% of dentists don't know. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but on page 4, I go into more detail around this one stat that's critical, a critical element, a dashboard that every practice should have. 91% of the clients that we brought on don't have it or don't know what it is. Page 5, I go into more detail around why most team training doesn't work. A lot of team training ends up in lack of success or lack of results to show for the success. And then on page 6 through 8, I'm going to go through our 4-part framework. And you're going to learn about how we look at things and how to overcome these paradoxes in your practice. 2020 is going to be a year of change for dentists. 2020, I'm projecting, is going to be the year that we look back and say, dentists stopped working in their practice 24/7, like I know a lot of dentists do. I mean, it's consuming. Doing the clinical side and running the business and wearing all the different hats can be consuming. And 2020, as painful as this coronavirus has been, I'm going to go ahead and predict that this is going to be the year that the systems and processes and people get installed in your practice so that you don't have to run around like a madman anymore. And you're going to start working on your practice. 3 or 4 days a week clinical, 1 or 2 days a week business. And often what happens is it turns into what we see in a lot of practices is it's 4, 5, 6 days a week clinical and very little on the practice business side stuff. And that's where you build efficiencies. That's where you build your A players. You build the profit side, and you build the strong foundation that your practice needs. Next steps from here. Let me leave you with a quote from a really smart guy by the name of Keith Cunningham. Championship teams have world-class defenses. The offense might score points, but defense wins the games. We've been in a defensive mode for the past few weeks. Offense needs to score some points here as your states are going to be opening up. So think about that and be mindful of how you're going to transition into an open state when this thing happens. I'm going to send out all the links here. Can you see that in the chat box? Can everybody see all the links I just sent out? Let me know if you can in there, please. I just sent that. Oh, hang on. I think I need to send it. Here we go. There we go. Let me know if you can see all these links in here. I'll be emailing these out. This is all going to be posted on our website. Yeah, there's all the links. Great, great. So let's jump into questions. We still got a boatload of people on here. Let's see. What do I say to patients to bring them back into the office for hygiene recall? A lot of that, Dr. Burson, is going to be up here in the patient safety and security letter, the whole plan. You want to avoid saying closure and shutdown and coronavirus, and you want to reemphasize the marketable attributes. You want to reemphasize how safe you're going to take care of people. And this letter will give you a lot of the strategy around that. So I'd encourage you to go check this letter out here and go through it. Reach out to me by email. I'm happy to work through it with you a little bit. And we can talk about that. Dr. Eccles, what do you think about raising fees to help with increased PPE cost? I think that's a really good move, Dr. Eccles. Insurance is not going to send you free money. They're not going to extend you an olive branch and say, oh, here's some more money for your PPE. I think value adding your expenses is probably a good move. I've heard some practices that want to create an additional line item and say, hey, it's an extra $10 per visit for enhanced PPE. I think of this like Amazon, Jeff Bezos' company. You know, they rolled out free shipping and everybody loved it because nobody wants to get dinged for every little nickel and dime charge. And I think if you have enhanced cost, you should just roll your fee up. And it should be one line item, and this is the level of service that you provide. Dr. Eccles, also, I saw you said you didn't have PPE yet. The Floyd County Health Department, which is where I'm from, is giving away PPE. They're giving away N95 masks and face shields. You might reach out to your county health department and see if they too are helping with that a little bit. I believe ADA is adding on code 1999 or something. I heard Delta Dental is already covering it. I haven't heard that yet, Anonymous. I think that would be, I would be surprised if that continued. Maybe it does, and that's great. Again, if we can prepare for worse and it ends up better, that's good. But that does surprise me that Delta, of all people, is covering that. But yeah, that's great if there's already a code in there. Let's scroll back up in here. What do we have? What questions do we have? Drop your questions in here. Michael Jones, will extra oral suction units be required? I'm not sure. I think that's going to vary by state. But I think more importantly than if it's required or not is, do your patients want to see it? If you can get your patients in and you can be productive and you can produce a living and keep your staff busy, I think the state requirement of requiring you to buy it is secondary to that. Let's see, questions. What brand thermometer is the most accurate, John? Most of the time I just have to tell doctors to shop on Amazon and look at the reviews. I haven't really looked at which brand is most accurate, but buy 3 of them and test them and see. I know here at home for my kids, I have a couple of them, and you know, if we're really not sure one of the kids is acting funny, we might just stick the old school one in their mouth. Now, you probably don't want to do that in your practice, but I think there's always a variation. And I think most importantly is just consistency with measuring that. Let's see. Dr. Burson, Kobe was here, Lower Marion, tragic. Yeah, met him when he was in 9th grade. Jennifer, what's the quote on the CPAC machine? I don't have a quote yet. If you want to reach out to me, if you're interested in this guy, this N95 mass decontamination system, shoot me an email here. I'm gonna put my email right here. Shoot me an email if you're interested in this thing, and I will let you know as soon as we get that set up. I'll probably tomorrow, I would guess. But shoot me an email right here, Colin R. at smartboxdental.com if you're interested in this thing. I think this thing is going to save thousands and thousands of dollars. There's the links. John, what's the best way to handle hygiene checks? John, when you say hygiene checks, you mean the doctor going in and checking, or do you mean the actual paychecks for your hygienist? Another John, high quality air purifier. Let patients know what we're doing to protect them. Yeah, John, Jon, John. You need to punch back in here to our safety and security plan and go through this whole thing, man. No contact thermometers. The whole key of this is to make sure your patients know they're being protected. They need to see the chairs get wiped down before they sit down and after they leave. Here is an air purifier. Either the Remy Halo or the Aris are good models. These are about $800. I'm getting one put in at my house. It takes, if you like to cook and you don't like the smell that cooking leaves, these things take the smell of cooking out of the air circulation. So I'm going to get one put into my house here because I like to be able to cook, and within an hour, it smells good again. Especially, I love Brussels sprouts, and man, talk about blowing out the house when I cook Brussels sprouts. You can get these things. I think these are really smart, John, and they've got a great demo video on their website. And then, of course, this thing here. Other John, John, John. Doctor exams. Yeah, so I think you've got to make sure that the masks are always on. You want to make sure that patients feel constantly safe. You know, lack of handshakes, I think, is prudent as much as it's not going to help build rapport. You know, there just is an expectation of a bubble right now of, obviously it can't be 6 feet in a dental environment, but you know, reinforcing, still doing those doctor checks, reinforcing everything that's changing, that we're going to be here, that everything is clean. When I look at medical practices right now, and I've talked to several that have been open, some of the Doc in the Box franchises, the emergency stuff, they're all heavily emphasizing safety and security. And I think the doctor exams are kind of along the same line. You know, you go in and you do your normal thing, but make sure safety and security is paramount. Do you undress from one to the other, hygiene and back again? You know, a lot of our doctors are going to hairnets, they're going to booties, footies, you know, certainly changing masks in between rooms because, right, the virus could be on the outside of the mask, especially if there's, you know, depending on what you're doing during your exam or what the hygienist did. So, yeah, I think having that PPE there, the face shields and all that is going to be critical. And having a sterilization system that can recycle some of that is going to be critical. Otherwise, this PPE stuff is going to get really expensive. I think it was Dr. Burson that suggested raising prices based on PPE. I think raising prices is generally always a good idea. And you can look at your fee schedules and see and figure out which ones are in what percentile. And we've done some of that stuff. But in general, we know prices are going up. So we know we always need to be increasing our fees. Are we allowing extra time per appointment for PPE changes? Yeah, of course. Yeah, I think so. I think it depends on your particular office layout, how that looks and how that works. I think paramount is the communication aspect of it to your staff and to your patients. You know, you're not going to be operating at full capacity. You're not going to have every room full and your hygienist bouncing between rooms if that's your model, or every restorative chair full with 10 assistants in there. This is going to be, for the foreseeable future, a lower volume model. So I think allowing extra time per appointment kind of comes with that territory that, you know, whether it's more time per appointment or you only have half the number of appointments a day, that's kind of two sides of the same coin as I'm thinking about it. Anonymous, how is increasing fees beneficial if insurance companies have a max payout on the services? Yeah, if you're negotiating all your rates, I ran out of water. If you're negotiating all your rates, insurance is not going to increase your reimbursements. you've got to move off that model. That's one of the things we're rolling out here in the next few weeks with our, excuse me, 6 steps to insurance independence that we're bringing out in our A-player hiring system. That's going to be critical as insurability rates go down with unemployment going up. That's going to be critical to getting your practice positioned to weather the future, to weather the storm. Dr. Gobry, I haven't seen the pricing yet, but I will get that out if you want to shoot me that email. I'm optimistic that with some volume that we can move, that we can get some discounts if you're looking at that N95 sterilizer machine. Where did it go? This guy right here. Shoot me an email there, Dr. Gobry, and we're going to see about doing a group buy with that if we get enough interest in it. Anonymous, how do you increase fees with PPO contracted fees? Yeah, same deal. You can negotiate some insurances you can negotiate with. A lot of them are not open to that, especially if you're a smaller practice. Yeah, you can renegotiate, John, and you can maybe move a little bit on that. I think that's a good thing to do. But I think there's a whole subset of the population that is going to be fee for service now. And how can we maximize on that? Taking a 20 or 30 or 40% haircut on our fee is a hell of a lot more expensive than spending 5 to 8% on marketing to attract a fee for service patient. I've never understood the attraction to cutting my fee 20 or 30% instead of paying $100 or $200 for a new patient in general, for a general new patient. Think of it this way. And this is what I think the difference is. If every employee that we have had to sign a quarterly tax payment check, a quarterly estimate like we all do, I think there would be an absolute insurrection in this country. The politics and the tax code would look radically different if every employee had to sign their own check and mail it to the government every quarter. And because they have withholding that we as employers do, the money just kind of disappears and they accept taxation at a higher rate than I think they would if they had to sign their own check and mail the money in. And I think the same thing happens with dental practices, with insurance. I think 20 or 30 or 40% disappearing off the top, they never saw that money. It was never in their hands. So they're willing to accept a higher cut off the top than if they have to sign the check to attract the fee-for-service patients themselves. I think it's the same philosophy or mentality. That's my take on that. That's how I feel about it. John, membership plans, I think, can be a great thing. Part of our 6 steps to insurance independence is going to be talking about membership plans. We have a partnership with Clear, K-L-E-E-R, and we have discounted fees, discounted rate for all of our clients that we can hook you up with through Clear as well. So that is one component, but it is not a one-size-fits-all plan. Not all practices are set up to get those membership plans. It just depends. There's little nuances. So those work in some cases really well. In other cases, some kinds of practices, they don't. I'm seeing emails come in here from a bunch of people around this N95 sterilizer. Yep, I'm getting your emails. Just keep sending them to me if you're interested. And if we get enough interest in it, I'll let you guys know tomorrow what kind of interest we got. And then I'll probably I'll have pricing information by tomorrow as well that we can show you guys what these things run. What other questions? What other questions do we have here? Questions, thoughts, comments? Michael, N95 will be standard. I don't know. I don't think so. I think, you know, we saw Pennsylvania during this outbreak. They had a knee-jerk reaction and they said, oh my gosh, every operatory has to be negative pressure with HEPA filtration. And then they reversed on that course because that was just silly. I don't know that N95s will be the standard forever. I could see that they become the standard if there is, you know, if you're running the Cavitron and something that's going to create a lot of aerosol, especially until there's a widespread vaccination available. I think that could be a possibility. I also think, I think there's a possibility in the future that just like influenza, they never really figure out because of the, we're reading right now that this coronavirus is adapting, it's morphing. And I think there's a possibility that same with the flu virus, some year the vaccine works great and other years it doesn't because they guessed wrong on what's going to happen. I think that just, I don't know. I don't know if there's ever going to be certainty away from the coronavirus, but if there's an effective treatment, I won't use the word cure. I know that's not clinically correct. If there's an effective treatment, if there is a partial vaccination, same as they do with influenza, and we find out that the death rate on this thing is really about the same as the flu, which is some of the new information that's coming out now is saying the San Diego Institute released that they thought, if I'm recalling the article correct, they thought that the diagnosis rate on coronavirus, the COVID-19, was 80x underdiagnosed, 80 times underdiagnosed. And which case, if you're do the math, this thing is on par with influenza, with the flu. So I don't know if that's true or not. We'll find out. We'll find out. We'll know here in a few weeks. John, you're asking about information about our services and what we do. I don't want to get into making this a self-promotion. I'm here to guide and provide resources. I will direct you here if you're interested in learning more about us. If you want to find out everything we can do and you want to walk through, I would encourage you to reach out here, bit.ly/SB20Ash. My director of practice growth, Ashley Best, did an hour-and-a-half recorded webinar last Thursday, and you can get access. I'll just go here and you can watch that hour-and-a-half webinar. And if you want to see all about that, that's all there available. Can regular level 3 masks be sterilized? I'm not sure, but I will be sure to ask tomorrow when I'm talking to the distributor, and I'll find out if that is the case. My guess is yes, because it's only getting to 155 degrees, and my assumption is yes, but I'll let you know tomorrow. Shoot me an email, and I'll put you on the list to distribute here too, as soon as I have more information on that. How does unemployment work for staff if you have them back part-time as you ramp up? My understanding is that they are eligible for partial unemployment if they're working partial hours. Yeah, that's good news. Liza, front office staff required to have a flu shot? I would. I think that's, unless there's some reason not to get it. I think anything you can say and do to make people more comfortable in their environment, and I mean that for your staff and for your patients, is very, very important. That's going to differentiate those that are successful and not successful coming out of this thing. Tracy, just saying this was a particularly good video meeting. Lots of good info and facts. Hey, thanks, Tracy. I appreciate the kudos and appreciate you taking some time here to hang out with me. Jim, what about those of us that are mid-60s? Should we ramp up or take early retirement? My initial plan was to retire at the end of 2021. I'm up for the challenge, but I see, will I see a return on the effort? Jim, that's a great question. I think maybe a consideration you want to think about is, does your exit, does your retirement include the sale of your practice? If you're banking on a good sale value to drive your retirement, now may not be the time to sell. I don't know anybody that's buying right now. DSOs will probably be buying a little bit in the future, although a lot of the funding behind DSOs has dried up. Right now, Wall Street is looking at preservation and stability over growth. So a lot of that DSO funding, I initially thought DSOs would be gobbling guys up left and right coming out of this and during this. I'm starting to think that maybe this will actually slow the DSO expansion because some of their funding may dry up as we come out of this. So yeah, I think some of that's going to depend on your personal financial situation. Yeah, if the sale of your practice is a small percent of your funding, that may not be a big consideration. I think the next 2 years are going to be very bumpy. It's going to be a lot of fast pivoting. I think there's a very high chance that almost every market area gets shut down a second or third time. I think part of that is weighing, if you're literally a year or two from retirement and you're good, do you want to go through all that? I don't know. How can you prop up your practice for a year to get out of this COVID crisis and then try to sell it? Maybe, I don't know. I guess that I would probably need some more information around what does make a run at it mean for you? What does go hard at it mean? How much are you trying to grow over where you were before? What are your numbers look like would be kind of the guiding principle there that I would want to look at. I'm not sure I can answer that one size fits all with just a generalized question like that. Dr. Eccles, what do you think of having the whole staff tested for COVID antibody? I think it's a great idea. I think every practice should have pictures in full PPE posted on their website, posted on their Facebook page. Dr. Griffin had a great idea last week to do that, and I love that. I don't know, is Dr. Griffin on here tonight? Are you on here, Dr. Griffin? I don't see your name, but everybody's got fake names. Hey, Dr. Forbes, I see you on here. Good to see you, man. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, I think Dr. Eccles, I think that's a great idea to get everybody tested and make sure that's a very marketable attribute. How are you relaying that to your staff and to your patients to ensure that they all realize the lengths and the measures you're going to? I'm not optimizing for 100% safety. I'm optimizing for a risk-based approach, and everybody's risk tolerance is different. I understand that. If your risk tolerance is you need 100% certainty, you probably ought to stay closed, because I don't think we're going to have any 100% certainty in the near future. We participate in Cigna and Delta, and we've been wanting to get out of them for some time. Is this a good time or a bad time to leave one of these companies now? I think it's never a bad time to dump insurance. I've been talking about dumping insurance for 10 years, and I think it's always a great time to dump insurance. We're releasing our insurance independence guide, which is really pulling this whole thing together. But here's what you don't want to do as you're dumping insurance. This is not just a lever we pull. It's not just zero to hero, right? It's a phased approach. Here's the game. You remember Indiana Jones, where he's trying to steal that gold idol off the pillar, and he's got the bag of sand, and he's like trying to figure out how much he thinks this gold pillar thing weighs, and he's measuring, he dumps out a little sand, and then he grabs the pillar and he flips the bag of sand onto it. And that's what we're trying to do with insurance. We're not trying to just kill it completely. We need to transition, because we need the money that insurance has given us today, and we probably still need some of it tomorrow while we're ramping up the fee-for-service side of our practice. So a phased approach to bring these two things into a balance. As you're phasing one out, you're bringing the other in. And as your fee-for-service side builds, you know, you're holding, this comes down to a scheduling thing. We need to make sure we're holding scheduled time open to make sure we have room to put our fee-for-service patients in, which is what this report is going to talk to you about. We need to be blocking our schedules. We need to be making sure that we can get new patients in, the right kinds of new patients. So there's really a little more of a comprehensive approach here besides just, is this the right time? There's a couple different things we want to tweak to make sure we're maintaining our cash flow and also maximizing our long-term cash, right? We need the cash flow today, but the reason to go fee for service is because we want to make more money tomorrow. We want to give less discounts. Again, 5 to 8% of your collections for marketing, or roughly $100 to $200 per new patient, is a hell of a lot cheaper than a 20 or 30 or 40% discount of your fees off the top. Michael, my hygienists want 100% security before they will come back to work. I'm feeling some resentment towards them and need to work through it. There's a really interesting situation with restaurants right now that I think is a parallel to this situation. I think restaurants are going to have a really hard time opening back up. I think everybody that was a restaurant worker is likely making more money or a similar amount of money on unemployment, on this enhanced unemployment and $1,200 payments and $500 per kid. And now they're talking about $2,000 a month for up to 12 months. And they're going to pay your mortgage too. I think a lot of these roles are going to say, you know what? I'm just going to stay at home. If the government's going to give me this money, I'm good. And I think that if your hygienist is saying that, 100% is very difficult. They're not 100% on an influenza test, and that's been around for 25 years. There's very few things in life that are 100%. I tell you what I'm 100% certain on right now. I'm 100% certainty that I can't give you 100% certainty. I'm 100% certain on that. And I think you got to have a come to Jesus talk with your hygienist and do it in a productive way, right? This isn't, they're bad people. They have fears that have to be worked through. And they need to understand that, hey, here's what we're doing. This comes back to the safety and security plan. That's why everything, the world revolves around the safety and security plan. You are marketing. Everything is marketing right now. You're marketing to your patients. You're marketing to your team. You're marketing to your hygienist. Everything is marketing. And if after you've marketed to them, they're still not willing to come in, then you've got to make the decision. Is there more that I'm willing to do, or do I need to find a new hygienist? The band has to play on, right? The practice is going to go on. You've got to have somebody to suck spit and drill teeth. And if that's the people you have now, whether it's hygienists or assistants or EDAs or whatever they are, that's great. But after you've done your best effort to secure everything, and you've relayed to them that, you got to make the call. They may be an A player, but if they're not willing to work for what you're willing to pay, or they're not willing to work at all, you got to make a decision. Am I going to allow that? Or am I going to go out and hire somebody new? And I think that's something you ought to be really upfront about. And it probably sounds a little bit, Susie, hey, here's everything we're doing. We want to make sure you're super safe and all this stuff, and we're doing everything we can. At the same time, if this isn't the right fit anymore, I'm okay with that. And I just need you to tell me. And I think if you watched, Michael, I think part of that is going to come back to the difficult conversation slide. A lot of that difficult conversation and how you position that and talk through that is going to be right here in this guy. I would encourage you to go watch that. We packed a lot of good information in here, into the slide deck and the video that we've covered. RE, I don't want to be the bank and have in-house payment plans. Are there other options than Care Credit? Yes, there are. If you shoot me an email, I'll get you a list of them. I don't have them offhand, but there are some other options out there that are available. Dr. Tripp, I've had air purifiers throughout the office for a year. They run 24/7. Never thought of it as a marketing tool. But is it too late to let it be known? No, absolutely not. Go download our patient security letter. Where'd this thing go? Here we go. Patient security and safety plan letter. Go download this thing, John. Put in here about all these standards that you guys have always had in everybody's best interest. You've been doing this forever. There's a famous story of a brewery that if you know anything about the bottling process, they purify bottles with steam before they fill bottles with any beer or alcohol or anything they're bottling it with. And there's a famous marketing campaign where they built it around, we use live steam to clean every bottle for the best taste. Well, every bottling company in the world cleans it with steam. And I don't know what live steam is any more than you probably do, but it's a made up term, right? This was like, who remembers the muscle memory? What was the muscle memory concept that P90X came out with? And they had this, you got to do our muscle memory routine, because if you're just doing the same exercise over and over, you're never going to build muscle and lose weight. All that is marketing. And there might be a little bit of science behind it. But yeah, I think that's a great thing to talk about, John. RE, I see you put your email in here. If you could shoot me an email, because I don't, once this thing goes away, all these QAs disappear. Here's my email address, RE. If you could shoot me an email address here, I'd be grateful, and I'll get back to you with whatever information. If you could just shoot me a quick little note, what you need, I'll make sure to get back to you on that. Ken, some of my staff who are making more money on unemployment are hoping we stay closed. They want the virus to go away before they think we should reopen. Ken, that's tough, man. The virus is not going away completely. No more than it's logical to say we're never going to have the flu again. This coronavirus is going to be a yearly recurring thing. They may have a vaccination. Maybe this coronavirus morphs and adapts, or maybe it doesn't. The core problem, Ken, is the mortality rate. If 8% of people that get this thing die, we have a big old problem. If the studies that come out that show that this thing is no more deadly than the flu at 0.1%, this thing is reduced to a case of the sniffles. Whether it's vaccinatable or not, this turns into a Tamiflu product that when you get sick, you take it, and maybe the vaccination works or maybe it doesn't. But Ken, you're not going to have that information for 6 to 12 months. So if your staff is looking for 100% certainty, I can tell you with 100% certainty, you're going to be closed for a real long time. And I think this comes back to the risk rating, the marketing to the staff to make sure that, they understand all the precautions and all the levels that you're going to make this thing work. Yeah, the first step is the antiviral. Yep, for sure. My hygienist want 100% security. Yep. Thank you, Michael. Appreciate you coming on here and hanging out tonight. I have 3 assistants that have young kids. Schools are closed. What can I do if all 3 of them want to stay home and get the family paid leave? Yeah, that's the new FFCRA law. Let me share. I'll share something extra here. I wasn't going to get into this tonight, but hey, since we're on the topic, I'll pull this out. Here we go. Can everybody see the screen? Can you see our SmartBox website here? So here's what you got to do. Go out to our website, smartboxdental.com, and then click here at the top. Watch this week's Survive and Thrive episode. Scroll down here to the middle. You'll see all the replays. April 22nd will be up here shortly. And then I want you to click here for our complete repository of tools, articles, and resources. Here you'll find the running list of everything that we're giving out right now. Everything we've talked about is going to be listed here. Why I'm showing you this is right here, we've got the new FFCRA paid sick leave update. So you can click here. I don't know who that guy is. He found a razor. All right, so you go here and you can get this PDF. And this is a summary view of the new FFCRA law. You may already be familiar with this. I'm just sharing this just in case, John. It all depends on the dates. The FFCRA didn't take effect until April 2nd. So if you had laid people off prior to April 2nd, my understanding is you don't have to pay them their family paid leave, the 2/3 pay for 12 weeks. They're not eligible for that if they were laid off before April 2nd. All the information on this thing is in here. You can go get this. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we need good people to run our practices. And you may have had A players, and it's going to be difficult, where you might have had an A player that their life changed and they got kids at home, or they are a caretaker for their elderly mother and they just don't want to come in, or maybe they're immunocompromised themselves. And we're going to have to wait. This is the decision we have. We have to weigh care for the practice against care for the people. And that's all we're balancing here. To keep everybody on the payroll with no regard for the practice is not caring for the practice. And the reality is, if the practice dies, everything dies. If the practice stops producing money, and it stops producing money for long enough that you run out of cash, nobody benefits anymore. You have to keep the practice alive. And that may mean making a difficult decision that involves letting go of somebody that you is an A player. Here's the two, Andy, these are the two air purifiers I mentioned here, the Remy Halo and the Aris air scrubber. The Remy is what we're having put in. The Remy Halo is the unit that I'm familiar with. We've had a few doctors that have installed it. The Aris, I'm told, is a good unit too. They're basically the same thing, two different brands. So that is that. Questions, final questions. We're past 9 o'clock here. What other questions, thoughts, information, suggestions, criticism? I'm open to all criticism. Cool. All right. I've got a bunch of emails here. I'm probably not going to get to them all tonight. I will get to them all tomorrow. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate you, Anonymous. I will get to them all tomorrow. I see a number of you have asked about the N95 system. I'll get all that to you. I've got substantially more emails than I usually have after one of these things. So give me till the end of the day tomorrow, but I'll make sure to get everything answered. And as always, we will keep moving forward. So last call, my email address is, oh shoot, where'd this thing go here? Here it is. Here's my email address. If you need to shoot me an email, colinr@smartboxdental.com. You probably have other emails from me. So anyway, I'm going to call this thing now. We don't have any more questions. Great having everybody here. Been a tremendous evening. Glad you guys, everybody got such value out of this. We spend a lot of time putting all this together. Dozens of hours a week putting all this information and organizing. Next week, we're going to have 5 new tips, 5 new strategies, 5 updates. So look forward to seeing everybody here next week. Everybody, if you're on our website and you've got a colleague or you've got a doctor, friend, or an associate, or the guy down the road that's just a good friend of yours, all this information here on our website is freely available. If you come to our website and you want to get the Marketing Maximizer for Dentists, we don't even ask for your email address. You just click here like this, and here's the marketing maximizer for dentists. All this stuff is you just come download it, share it with everybody that you think it's going to help, because truly we're all in the same boat together. And these are resources that maybe you don't need every resource, but everybody can use a little bit of guidance around some of these things. Here's the difficult conversations. It's right there in the resources. You can watch the video here if you want to watch the presentation, what's a difficult conversation. If you want the slide deck, you can come here, get instant access, and this will give you the whole slide deck. It's, how many pages is this thing? It's 12 slides. 12 slides. So this thing's pretty quick. The presentation is 19 minutes long, and there's a lot of really great suggestions and information in it. So here we go. Okay, I'm done now. Thanks for attending, and see you all next week.